Let me start by asking Peter Newlander to set the tone for this afternoon.
Well, I'd like to thank you very much. So criminal libel is a threat to freedom of expression. I think everybody in this room who is a journalist is very keenly aware of the possibility of getting sued for libel, be it criminal libel or civil libel, at any point, and being threatened with the severe consequences of that. Because if you're sued under criminal laws, you get the entire apparatus of the state being brought against you. You get prosecutors who are reasonably well equipped, and you have the threat, fines, hanging over your head, or other criminal sanctions. And if you're found guilty, you have a criminal record, which is of some consequence. It means, for example, if you want to travel into the United States, that you have to declare that, and you'll get some question on that. Equally, if you are faced with civil libel suits, you potentially face bankruptcy, because it's costly to defend these cases. And if you're awarded the kind of damages that are sometimes sought, then you will certainly be bankrupt, because these run into the hundreds of thousands, if not. It actually itself has decriminalized libel only 2 years ago. Up until 2 years, it was still a criminal offence, technically, in the UK to harm somebody's reputation. But it hadn't been used since the late 1970s. So it was outdated already. It was something that was still in the statute books and was just sitting there. Just as the UK's sedition laws were only technically taken off the statute books 2 years ago, but they hadn't been used in decades. The UK is the kind of country that has a lot of old laws sitting on statute books people forget about. But they can be conveniently brought into action. And it was part of a civil society push that the English government decided a couple of years ago to decriminalise these laws, but not just for the UK. What England also wanted to do was to... The problem with libel laws isn't just the criminal libel laws, it's the civil libel laws. And you've already said that London used to be known as the libel capital of the world. It was very easy to bring a libel suit for anyone around the world, and extremely difficult to defend these cases. And we've seen examples, we've seen bizarre examples, in very recent history. There were Russians, people from the Ukraine, powerful businessmen always, people from Saudi Arabia who have come to London and who have brought libel suits against usually individual journalists, often bloggers, and they sued over publications that weren't even in English. There was a Ukrainian oligarch, powerful businessman, who sued a Ukrainian website over an article that had been sued in Ukrainian, and it was allowed to proceed in the English courts. It was truly bizarre. But even the less bizarre cases, even where local corporations were suing local journalists, were extremely difficult to defend. Were actually very simple. Last year, to bring a libel case to trial and to defend it would be an estimated cost of £800,000. And that's because you would need to pay your lawyers, but you also need to pay the other guy's lawyers if you lose. And lawyers are expensive. The threat of libel laws is very serious financial consequences. And a libel reform campaign was launched in the UK about 3-4 years ago, which was uniquely successful because it brought together a coalition of not just journalists, but also of scientists who were getting sued. It brought together artists who were also getting sued. You see, the libel laws don't just affect you guys. It doesn't, I assume all of you it goes far beyond that. The scientific community gets bullied, particularly by big corporations, by pharmaceuticals. And so the libel laws in the UK have now been amended to deal with all of that. The amendments are on the books, but haven't technically yet been brought into force, so we can't say how useful they will be. But among the things that they've done is they've limited the ability of companies to sue in libel, because it's so often big companies that sue. So the rule now is, and this is the same in Australia, by the way, where if you're a company of more than 10 employees, you can't sue in libel. So that really limits the ability of big companies to sue. In the UK, if you can't show that you have actually suffered harm as a company, that means that you're going to have to show that your sales figures have gone down, or that you've suffered some other financial harm. Unless you can do that, you will no longer be able to sue in libel, and that immediately places a massive barrier upon the ability of large companies to survive. There have been libel cases that have run for 10, 15 years. And who can defend them? Who can be quoted? So that has been simplified. They brought in rules to deal with what in the UK is known as forum shopping, where people from, the UK itself is a fairly small country, England and Wales, but they've limited the ability of people from elsewhere, be that France or be that Russia, to sue in the UK. So if you now want to bring a libel suit, you have to show that you have a connection, and that the person that you're suing has a connection with the UK. So you can't launch you can't launch proceedings in the UK just to inconvenience a publisher who might be located somewhere in another country. So a whole panoply of defenses has been brought in, procedure has been simplified, and all of this in recognition of the fact that there is a real public good that was being harmed. Because decriminalizing libel isn't something that is just being done to serve the journalists, just being done to serve the media. Because the media at the moment, and this is an important thing to realize, the media is extremely unpopular in the UK. There's been a number of recent scandals of media. The news of the world, they could put out business by it. The whole Everton thing, absolutely. And part of the success of the libel reform campaign has been to distance the need to decriminalize libel from these media scandals. And that's why they brought in scientists, that's why they brought in artists as well, to show that these libel laws affect everyone in society, and actually the person that suffers the most is the person, the recipient of all the news that could be published, but that isn't being published for fear of libel news. So it's the public at large that benefits from the decriminalization of libel laws. And it is that realization that I think that has really made the campaign in the UK successful. As I said, the whole procedure has only just finished, so it's too early to tell what the actual impact is, but the early signs are looking very good. I'll just leave it at that, the way to do that.
I would like to also thank the organizers for inviting us to speak here today. We work worldwide. We have cases in about 40 countries at the moment. And one thing that is, of course, very evident looking at our caseload is that criminal defamation is an issue that comes up in whichever region we work. Decriminalization in and of itself is not the only solution to this. There are also issues with civil defamation, but I'll get to that later. Two examples from Africa. One case concerns the prosecution of a journal editor and owner in Burkina Faso in West Africa, who had written two critical pieces about the prosecutor general in the country, alleging that he might have been involved in corruption. For this, his newspaper was shut down for half a year. He was convicted to a prison sentence of a year and to fines, penalties that amount to about 20 times the average annual salary in Burkina Faso. He is currently still in jail. His conviction was upheld on appeal, and we're now taking the case to the African Court on Human and People's Rights, arguing that clearly this conviction is in violation of all sorts of standards, including the African Charter and the ICCPR. This actually comes in tandem with a broader campaign to decriminalize defamation. Another example is a case that we've supported in Rwanda throughout the national proceedings, and we're now taking to the African Commission, which concerns a female Rwandan journalist who wrote a piece wondering what President Kagame was doing about corruption within his own government. For this, she was also convicted to 1 year of imprisonment and also a fine. Then moving on to Central Asia, Azerbaijan, many newspapers on basically, I would almost say a daily basis, are being slapped with lawsuits, are being awarded enormous fines.